Welcome back to the Infinite Jungle. This is the penultimate episode of the Infinite Jungle for this year. After tomorrow, the Infinite Jungle show will be going on a winter hiatus and returning sometime in the new year for a fresh new season. I want to thank all of my listeners that stuck around for this entire season one. It was of course, a rocky start. And many of you have stuck through a lot of ramblings over the last couple months. But I hope that through listening to this show in 2024, you were able to glean some insights on how the Ethereum protocol gets updated. And I hope everyone will join again for season 2 of the Infinite Jungle show when it comes out. On today's show, I will be giving my takeaways from ACDE number 202. This is the last ACD call for the year as well. There will be no ACD calls for the next 2 weeks. Next week's ACDC call is canceled, and then the ACDE call that is scheduled there the week thereafter will be replaced by a Pectra testing call. Before we get started with the show today, here is a quick show disclaimer. I need to remind you to please refer to the disclaimer linked in the podcast show notes and note that none of the information in this podcast constitutes investment advice, an offer, recommendation, or solicitation by Galaxy Digital or any of its affiliates to buy or sell any securities. Before we get into what was discussed on ACDE 202, I want to share a short poem that I wrote for my listeners as you will be listening to this show at the earliest on Christmas Eve. This is a little bit of a customized version of the classic Christmas poem, "Twas the Night Before Christmas." 'Twas the night before Christmas, when all through the jungle every creature was stirring. There was never any shortage of trouble. The layers and apps were being worked on with care in hopes that Pectra soon would be near. The developers should have been nestled all snug in their beds, while visions of validator consolidations danced in their heads. Tim in his ACDE meetings and Alex in ACDC both had finally settled down for a few weeks' rest, you see. When out of nowhere there arose such a clatter, I sprang to my laptop to see what was the matter. Away to my desk, I connected in a flash, tore open my Discord, and threw on my thinking hat. The dawn of a Devnet shone like new fallen snow. It gave the luster of mainnet success to all, even ETH foes. When what to my wondering eyes should appear, Perry, in his usual cheer, with 6 other pandas, so nimble and quick, I knew in a moment Pectra is coming soon. Tick, tick, tick. More rapid than Denkun, this one is near. The ETH devs shouted, now rollups, now wallets, now users and stakers, on DeFi, on NFTs, on meme coins and gaming. To the top of the block, to the bottom of the mempool, Pectra is coming. Prepare, prepare, prepare. Okay, that's the end of the poem. I hope that wasn't too cringe. But yes, indeed, devs are preparing for the launch of Pectra Devnet 5. This was the primary topic that was discussed on ACDE 202. This was what developers were talking about for the majority of the call. And it does seem as though a few clients are ready for Pectra Devnet 5. They are passing local tests, local kurtosis tests. Perry, the EF DevOps engineer, Ethereum Foundation developer operations engineer, shared that the Bezu and Teku clients are already passing some of these tests, and Lodestar is not that far behind. Other clients are still in the implementation phase. Given that Besu and Teku and Lodestar and a few others are getting close to their final implementations for DevNet 5 specs, Perry said that he's ready to launch the DevNet as soon as client teams are ready later this month or early next in early January. So there's not a firm date that was talked about for DevNet 5 launch on the call, but it sounds like whenever client teams are ready, the DevNet 5 can be launched. So soon TM is really the the takeaway about the timing there. And while there are some clients, like I talked about, that are more or less ready for DevNet 5, I would say that based on how many updates to Pectra Devnet 5 specifications that were approved on the call, DevNet 5 specifications are not quite ready for clients just yet. There's a few PRs that still need to be merged based off of ACDE 202 and the decisions that were made on this call. So some of the updates to Pectra Devnet 5 specifications that were agreed upon. The first one was actually a decision that was made on last week's ACDC call. But on this week's ACDE call, the decision was reaffirmed, and there's now a new EIP number to formalize all of the changes. So as a recap, EIP 7742 is out. Changes to the blob capacity will not be dynamically set by the consensus layer in Pectra. Instead, developers are deciding to go with a simpler EIP 7840. This is the change the blob capacity increase through configuring the Genesis file. This is again a simpler way for developers to make a change to the blob capacity increase. It does require both the consensus layer and the execution layer to be updated. I think developers are thinking of this method as a one-time thing. For the long term, developers still do want to implement EIP 7742, perhaps in Fusaka, but the unexpected complexity of this EIP is really what made developers rethink whether or not it should be in Pectra in this upgrade. Developers also talked about some minor changes to the chain ID field in EIP 7702. 7702 is the EIP that will increase the flexibility of user controlled accounts. It is a pretty important EIP for, I would say, wallet developers to start looking into now if they haven't already, because it will introduce more features for what users can do, what kind of approvals users can make to transactions. This means being able to do things like gas sponsorship, transaction batching. There's a couple of tweaks to the chain ID field that developers talked about related to EIP 7702 that they will be implementing in Pectra Devnet 5. They also talked about the EIP 2537, which is the BLS precompile. Finally, the gas repricing for BLS precompile operations is finalized, is complete. So the new gas schedule, the new fee schedule for these BLS precompile operations will be included in DevNet 5. There was also some changes to EIP 2935, serve historical block hashes from state, that was discussed on the call. These changes were recommended in light of a third-party audit that was done on all Pectra system contracts. So there is a system contract that will be created through EIP 2935, and there were some tweaks to that system contract to bring it up to par, bring it in line with the structure of all the other system contracts that are going live in Pectra that developers will be implementing. So quite a few. I would say that was a lot of EIPs, new EIPs. I shouldn't say new EIPs, but like new specifications, changes to multiple EIPs. And while it can seem a bit last minute, as this is the last ACD call before the holidays. I would say that based on all of these decisions that developers have made on the most recent call and then on the couple of calls before it, that Pectra seems to be wrapping up in terms of scope a little bit earlier than I expected. Developers have decided on the blob capacity increase. They will be effectively doubling the blob capacity of Ethereum. There is now no longer any major EIPs, outstanding EIPs that still need deciding for devs to make a decision on. I would say there's no major areas of Pectra specifications either. That is a big question mark for developers. When developers were talking, especially about EIP 7702 in the early phases of Pectra development and Pectra preparations. There was lots of questions about how exactly to implement EIP 7702, lots of questions related to various edge cases with MaxEB. I think that more or less the big parts of Pectra have been figured out, and the launch of DevNet 5, I think, will be more or less the final Pectra specifications. Now, there are, I would imagine, bugs and unexpected errors that will come up in the process of testing on DevNet 5, and developers will have to um, make new releases for a DevNet 6. I do think that's likely, just given that on DevNet 5, you're going to have the implementation of new EIPs, like the EIP that will increase call data. You'll have the new pricing for BLS gas precompiles. There's quite a lot of new stuff going into DevNet 5. But all of those combined, I think, is more or less the final scope of Pectra. And once the bugs and the kinks are figured out on DevNet 5, I think there will likely be a DevNet 6 to ensure that Pectra's scope is more or less complete before developers feel confident enough to move on and to start upgrading the public Ethereum testnets, Sepolia and Holeshki. So that's the status on Pectra Devnets and Pectra Devnet 5 specifications. Developers spent the rest of the call talking about some updates that are not really Pectra related, but still somewhat important. Developers talked about their rollout plan for EIP 4444. Developers are still aiming to drop pre-merge history from Ethereum clients by May 1st. So all of the historical data from before September 2022, trying to remove that from clients by May 1st and redirect users that want access to that data through a different network, through a different peer-to-peer network, or have some other kind of solution for retrieving historical data. One of the prominent solutions that many client teams are working towards supporting in light of VIP 4444 is the portal network. Developers are still working out really the specifics on how to roll out this history expiry. They have the date set. They have more or less the plans around updating the wire protocol of Ethereum, the networking protocol. But there are still some questions around how to best test this rollout that developers are continuing to discuss on the calls, and they've agreed to still continue to discuss that asynchronously from the calls. Developers are also still discussing the gas versus gossip limit dependencies. I'm not going to really go into the specifics of this debate because I went into it on the prior Infinite Jungle episode where I was recapping the latest ACDC call. So if you're interested, you can go listen to that episode. But developers are still kind of working through what different solutions, long-term solutions there could be to this issue of the gas limit potentially being increased by validators more than the networking layer of Ethereum can handle, more than the gossip limit can feasibly support. Developers talked about further changes to the EIP process and a few non-Pectra EIPs related to a native privacy solution on Ethereum and reserving transaction types for rollups. I would say that all of these topics that are not Pectra specific are not as important, I would say, as the Pectra things that were discussed at the top of the call. And if some of these EIPs, some of these discussion items, if they do become very relevant to the Ethereum protocol, I am sure that we will hear about them again on ACDE calls in the new year. So I'm not going to go into these very much, but if you're interested in learning about them and reading up on them in more detail, as always, I will link to the full call write-up in the show notes of the episode, so you can find more details about that. But yes, the most important part of the call, I would say, was related to Pectra, DevNet 5 specifications updates, and the next DevNet, the next DevNet launch, which could happen later this month or, as developers said on the call, early next in January. Those I would say are that I would say is the big takeaway from ACDE 202. I'd like to spend some time talking about 2025 and what we can expect from Ethereum in the new year, as this is the penultimate episode of the Infinite Jungle Season 1. I thought it would be good to kind of wrap up my monologues or wrap up these types of Infinite Jungle episodes where I recap the ACDE calls by going a little bit broader on this episode and talk about three important, I would say, trends or 3 important events that I'm going to be watching and I'm expectant for in 2025. The first one is obviously no surprise. It's the continuation of what I just talked about, the takeaways from ACDE 202, and that is the launch of Pectra, the activation of the Pectra upgrade, Ethereum's next major Ethereum upgrade, already based on the development from 2024 and how we're closing off the year. Very, very likely that Pectra is going to happen, hit mainnet sometime in the first half of 2025, so early 2025. It is going to have major impacts on users, end users, through, of course, the EIP 7702 upgrade, depending on how wallets integrate EIP 7702 and allow users to take advantage of new features with their user controlled accounts. I think it will definitely inform how Ethereum wants to pursue more aggressively a native account abstraction roadmap. It'll introduce a lot more flexibility, but I think there will be a lot of learnings also on some of the security implications of this and how wallets and protocol devs need to work together to find a optimal kind of path forward for full native account abstraction. So Pectra will have implications on end users through EIP 7702. It will also have major impacts on stakers through the increase to the maximum effective balance. Again, there will be validators, large validators like Coinbase, Lido node operators, others, Kraken, that will have to update how they are running validator nodes. They will be able to consolidate a lot of the staked ETH that they have, instead of having 132 ETH validators. They could consolidate that right down to just one validator with a maximum of 2,048 ETH, and a couple of other validators with smaller maximum effective balances. So this will be a major change to the operations of validators. So another kind of big impact on stakers, though it seems a bit like the impact is not going to be positive or negative for validators. It's simply consolidating them. I think it will have some minor improvements to large validators, especially because they don't have to manage so many different validator keys and authorizations. They can all consolidate it down to just a handful, which I think hopefully will be an improvement to large validator node operators, a little bit less of a headache to manage and monitor the health of their validators. Because now, hopefully they'll only have to monitor a handful instead of like several 32 ETH validators. And then finally, of course, the rollups. This was a bit of a last minute decision from the this was a little bit of a last minute decision from the devs, from the rollup devs. What am I saying? Not the rollup devs, the Ethereum core devs, to include the blob capacity increase into Pectra. This was a last minute addition, but it's definitely going to have big impacts. It's a big win for rollups because you're going to have a doubling of blob throughput. This will likely reduce rollup fees, and it will just increase the capacity, I would say, of Ethereum to be able to handle more layer 2 rollup launches. So yes, so lots of impacts for Pectra. And while if Pectra, as I said on the show, was the largest upgrade by number of EIPs included before the Pectra split, based on the EIPs that have been included into Pectra, Pectra still remains the largest upgrade in Ethereum's history by number of EIPs. I think that the size of this upgrade, how many different code changes are included in Pectra, it does come with increased risk when it comes to implementing Pectra. I wouldn't be surprised if developers found an unexpected bug that needs fixing in Pectra when they're upgrading the public testnets. And of course, fingers crossed, we don't find any unexpected bugs when Pectra goes live on mainnet. But the possibility of this is, of course, heightened because of the size of Pectra, because Pectra is containing so many EIPs. I believe 11 EIPs is now the number, and Byzantium is the prior upgrade that had about 9 EIPs. So Pectra isn't the largest upgrade in Ethereum's history by a huge margin. But there are complex EIPs in Pectra, like Max EB, EIP 7702, that will all be coupled together in one big upgrade, and that presents risk to the network. So Pectra is the one event that I would be very much looking out for next year. That is a catalyst, of course, for ETH value, because Pectra will come with so many improvements to networking, to end user, to UX, to roll up fees. These are all good things for the network, but it does come with increased risk when it comes to implementing and trying to change a blockchain like Ethereum that is the most decentralized general purpose blockchain. It's always a risk when it comes to making backwards incompatible upgrades, hard forks like these. So yeah, the first one, I mean, nobody should be surprised when I'm saying this, but of course, Pectra is one big thing to be watching out for when it comes to the Ethereum roadmap and ecosystem next year. The second big kind of trend, or what I'm going to be watching out for next year, is rollup adoption. Kraken recently announced their L2. Deutsche Bank recently announced their L2, and I am predicting quite a lot more L2 launches next year. I am predicting an expansion of the L2 ecosystem more than what we've seen in 2024, and to re-emphasize, rollups are Ethereum's long-term scaling roadmap. Sure, you can have these minor increases in L1 scalability through CAS limit increases, and you can make some tweaks, improvements here and there to the L1, but for magnitudes more scale, for ETH to scale to the masses, global adoption for millions of more users, Ethereum developers are still committed to using L2s, to using a layered scaling solution to achieve this kind of sale. So to the extent that there is more L2 adoption, that we see more increased transaction user activity, to see more transaction activity on L2s, more apps launching, more L2s in general being relied on by major banks, major exchanges, major institutions, I think those will be very positive and beneficial to Ethereum. And so catalysts when it comes to rollup adoption, rollup maturity, especially maturity and kind of like the tech stack of rollups, improving the interoperability between rollups, and just more L2s launching, period. Those are definitely catalysts for ETH value that I would be watching out for in 2025. The rollup centric roadmap for Ethereum will be more important than ever in 2025. So while this podcast is very focused, or these segments, especially the monologue episodes, are very focused on Ethereum L1 development, you can expect more guest episodes and greater focus for topics related to rollups in season 2 for Infinite Jungle. And finally, last but not least, another kind of important trend that I'll be watching for Ethereum in 2025 is the institutional adoption of ETH. Under, of course, the Biden administration, under the SEC chair, Gary Gensler, regulatory risk surrounding Ethereum has been a major headwind in 2024. But come 2025, under a new U.S. President, under the Trump administration, under a new SEC chair, Paul Atkins, there is the likelihood of a more favorable regulatory environment for the crypto industry at large. And of course, while regulation moves a lot slower than people would like most of the time, I think already there's just so much positive sentiment when it comes to the use of DeFi, when it comes to NFTs, crypto ETFs, all of these topics that historically for the crypto industry have been riddled with a lot of regulatory headwinds. There's a lot more positive sentiment for these sectors of crypto next year under the new administration. And I think that is a crucial the change in sentiment there, I think, is crucial for institutional adoption. I think that one of the things I'll be looking at is specifically innovation in stablecoins, in DeFi, and RWAs, these areas where institutional adoption and participation is quite needed for these types of apps and assets to really take off. I think that's kind of key indicators of institutional adoption for ETH growing that I will be watching out for a lot in 2025. So there you have it. Those are my three what I'm watching for in the Ethereum ecosystem for 2025: Pectra, rollup adoption, and institutional participation. Tomorrow on the Infinite Jungle, this will be again the last episode of the Infinite Jungle. Tomorrow will be. It will be an episode with our dear friend Nixo from the Ethereum Foundation. We are going to be talking about updates to the staking ecosystem, as per usual, as I usually do with Nixo. But then we're also going to talk about her takes on what she's most excited for in 2025 come next year. And that is how the season 1 Infinite Jungle show will be wrapped up, and that show is coming out tomorrow on Christmas Day. So thank you truly to everybody for tuning in for this show, for tuning into the show just generally. I hope that everybody who is listening has a wonderful Christmas and New Year's with whoever you're celebrating with friends or family. And I hope that you learned something new about Ethereum from this show. I send everyone very warm wishes for this holiday season. I am signing off from Vancouver, British Columbia. You will notice that on tomorrow's episode, I actually sign off from New York, but that's because that episode was recorded earlier before I flew out for the holidays. So I am spending this holiday season in Vancouver. But wherever you are, for my listeners, wherever you are, Merry Christmas. And in your explorations of the infinite jungle that is Ethereum, stay safe out there.